The $15,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux 1996 tilted in Scott's hand, crimson liquid catching the light of crystal chandeliers. Then it poured over Elena's head in a cascade of burgundy destruction. It happened so fast. One moment Elena was standing there in her emerald designer gown, telling him quietly to leave before he embarrassed himself. The next, 200 wedding guests watched in frozen horror as $15,000 worth of vintage French wine drenched her hair, her face, her dress, turning elegant fabric into a stained mess of humiliation. The wine splashed onto the marble floor. Droplets hit the white tablecloth like blood spatter. Elena's carefully styled hair collapsed under the weight of the liquid, sending rivulets down her neck, her shoulders, pooling in the expensive fabric at her feet. And the entire reception hall, a venue that cost more than most people's yearly salary, went absolutely silent. Scott stood there, empty bottle in hand, breathing hard, watching wine drip from Elena's face onto the polished floor. He felt righteous, powerful, vindicated. This was the moment he'd been planning for weeks, the public destruction of the woman who had taken everything from him. That's what you deserved then, and that's what you deserve now, he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe this will remind you what you really are without me. Nothing but trash that needed to be taken out. Elena didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't run. She just stood there, wine streaming down her face, and smiled. A small, knowing smile that made something cold settle in Scott's stomach. Then the man beside her moved. Distinguished, early 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than Scott's BMW. Jinwoo Park produced a handkerchief with movements that were too controlled, too precise, like a predator deciding whether to strike. His dark eyes never left Scott's face as he gently dabbed wine from Elena's cheeks. "It's all right, Jinwoo," Elena said softly, her hand covering his. "He's not worth it." Scott had no idea who this man was, no idea about the empire he controlled from Seoul to New York. No idea that Jinwoo Park's name was spoken in whispers in certain circles, that he had connections reaching into governments, banks, and organizations that operated outside the law. No idea that the security personnel scattered throughout the reception weren't just wedding staff, but Jinwoo's personal team. And Scott definitely had no idea that he had exactly 7 days before his entire world would begin to systematically collapse. Bank accounts frozen, federal investigations launched, business partnerships dissolved, reputation destroyed with surgical precision. As Scott watched his daughter Ella sobbing, as he saw the disgust on every face in the room, as Jinwoo Park approached the microphone with the calm of a man who had already decided Scott's fate, something in Scott's chest went cold. He had just humiliated the wrong woman. And when Jinwoo's quiet voice filled the reception hall, introducing himself as Elena's husband and promising consequences Scott couldn't escape, Scott finally understood the difference between having power and crossing someone who actually wielded it. Scott Chen had poured $15,000 of wine on a woman protected by a man who could make problems disappear. And he was about to learn that some mistakes cost everything. Before we dive deeper into this story of love, revenge, and redemption, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us grow this community and bring you more stories like this one. Turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. Now, let's get into this dramatic journey. The worst decisions in life are often made when pride becomes more important than love. Scott Chen was about to learn this lesson in the most devastating way possible. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Scott walked away from his marriage to Elena with everything that mattered. At least, everything he thought mattered. The house in the suburbs with the 3-car garage. The successful tech consulting business they had built together, though he made sure the divorce settlement reflected it as his alone. Their savings, their investments, even the furniture. He'd hired the most aggressive lawyer money could buy, and that lawyer had painted Elena as a woman who contributed nothing, who was simply along for the ride, a gold digger who married Scott for his potential, and then coasted on his success. The truth was far different, but truth rarely matters in divorce court when one party has unlimited resources and the other can barely afford representation. Elena had worked alongside Scott for years, managing the administrative side of their business, raising their daughter Ella, maintaining their home, and supporting Scott through every career setback and triumph. But Scott's lawyer made her sound like a lazy housewife who spent her days shopping and gossiping, and the judge, weary and overworked, had split things in Scott's favor. Elena had walked away with virtually nothing. A small settlement that barely covered first and last month's rent on a modest apartment. No alimony, because Scott's lawyer successfully argued she was young enough and capable enough to support herself. And shared custody of Ella, though even that felt like a hollow victory, because Scott had made it clear he would make Elena's life difficult at every turn. For 5 years, Scott watched with satisfaction as Elena struggled. He heard through mutual friends about her working multiple jobs, waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night. He knew about the car repossession, the eviction notice she barely avoided, the times she showed up to pick up Ella looking exhausted and worn down. It fed something dark inside him, confirmed his narrative that she was nothing without him, that he had been the only reason for their success. Scott, meanwhile, had thrived. The business grew exponentially. He bought a larger house, drove a BMW, wore expensive suits, and dated a woman 15 years younger than Elena, a detail he made sure Ella mentioned to her mother. He was living proof that he had been right all along, that Elena had been the dead weight he needed to shed to truly soar. But pride is a strange thing. It's never quite satisfied. Success wasn't enough for Scott. He needed Elena to know she had failed, needed the world to witness her failure, needed to grind her face in the fact that she was nothing without him. And when Ella's wedding invitation arrived, Scott saw his opportunity. Ella hadn't wanted her father at the wedding. The years since the divorce had been difficult for their relationship. She had witnessed her mother's struggles firsthand, had seen the cruelty in how Scott treated Elena, had heard him make dismissive comments about the woman who raised her. But Ella's future in-laws were traditional, and they believed a father should walk his daughter down the aisle, should be there to celebrate this milestone. They convinced Ella to extend an invitation to Scott, assuring her it would mean so much for her future family to see that unity. Ella reluctantly agreed, sending Scott a formal invitation with a handwritten note that simply said, "Please behave. This day is about my future, not your past." Scott read that note and laughed. Behave? He planned to do exactly the opposite. He planned to finally, publicly, devastatingly, show everyone who Elena really was. He spent weeks planning his speech, crafting every cutting remark, every humiliating detail. He would toast his daughter's happiness while exposing her mother's failures. It would be perfect. The wedding was held at an elegant estate on the outskirts of the city, the kind of venue that cost more than most people made in a year. Scott arrived in his BMW.